Do you ever feel like you're spinning your wheels in business? In this episode, Greg and I talk about building real momentum by using the flywheel concept. Getting your metaphorical flywheel working is a key factor in sustainable growth. Understanding momentum and how to build momentum is a skill not talked about enough. It's like a hockey game where the team with momentum is hard to stop once it gets going. Building momentum in business takes consistent activity over time. So have a listen and let us help you understand this better as we discuss the flywheel concept and the 20-mile march. Thanks for joining us. I'm Don Gertz, and I'm with my friend Greg DeMarco, and we were just talking a little bit about technology, because we've had some technical difficulties the last couple of times we've done this, and it's sometimes hard to do a remote recording and know whether or not everything's going. So you kind of trust the system, but we've learned how to test it. So we think we're good, but it's good to see your smiling face, Greg.
No.
And how have you been?
Hey, listen, it's been good. I can't complain. The weather's been pretty good. Nice and warm, sunny. What about your neck of the woods?
Well, I think we're in March. It's May, but it feels more like March. Our weather's been really cool this week. We've had an atmospheric river. Like if you know anything about the west coast of British Columbia, you know that we get atmospheric rivers, and that's caused a big flood in our area in 2021. But it's rare to get an atmospheric river in May. But we've had an atmospheric river here for the last couple of days, so we've got lots of rain. And it's only about 12, 13 degrees. That's Celsius for any Americans that are watching this, but the rest of the world would know what 12 and 13 degrees is. What would that be in Fahrenheit? That would probably be about 55.
60s, 50s? Yeah.
Yeah, 50, I think mid 50s. And so it's a little cool for June, but anyway, such is the case. We can't control the weather. We can only control what we are doing ourselves. So what we're wanting to talk about today is we want to talk about a concept that I think is often missed, and in our sales, we think about, when we talk about developing our sales, we think about how do we get better? How do we develop our sales skills? How do we, come up with closing questions? How do we close the sale and focus? We focus on that quite a bit. But one of the things that all those things lead to is something called momentum. And sometimes we don't talk about how to establish momentum or how to build momentum or how to gain momentum. But it's like a hockey game. Unfortunately, the Maple Leafs were knocked out really early in the playoffs, and Vancouver's gone now too, and we're relegated to Edmonton.
You want to stay on track, I think you're Don.
Well, I want to stay on track, but I do have to say, they talk, there's this discussion about whether or not Edmonton is Canada's team, because Canada hasn't won the Stanley Cup, or a Canadian team hasn't won the Stanley Cup. And, there's all these people jumping on the bandwagon, I guess, for Edmonton. But I can't jump on that bandwagon. I'm just sorry. No. I mean, I'm not a real Florida fan either, so I'll just watch it because it'll probably be good hockey. And the move Connor McDavid made in the last game was just absolutely amazing. But anyway, I digress. I just wanted to go on the record saying that I am not a fan of the Edmonton Oilers. So
there you go. I kind of was gathering that through the conversation. Yeah. So
yeah, they have very good players. Connor McDavid is absolutely amazing, but I don't like him. Anyway.
But I don't like them. Yeah, it's kind of like me and the Habs. I don't like them either. So,
yeah, well, they haven't been that great for the last little while. But anyway, we digress. We're talking about momentum. So, what's your take on momentum?
It's really important, obviously, for a lot of things in our career, personal life, whatever it is. Momentum is what drives us forward, and you can think of it as, well, it's like a big boulder you're rolling down the hill. Once it gets enough momentum, it keeps going. The only thing is you have to control it. And that's kind of what the 20-mile march taught us. is controlling ourselves when that gets going so that we don't overreact or we just stay stable. It's consistency that's important. And we've talked about this flywheel before, but not in any great detail, talking about Jim Collins's book, Good to Great. And he talks about this flywheel concept, which obviously momentum plays a big part of, because it talks about, and you can really relate, he's talking about businesses, of course, but I always go back to Jim Collins's because his books and his theories and his ideas, because he has, in my opinion, captured a certain amount of what it takes to be successful and consistent success throughout a business's lifespan. And there are specific concepts in that sort of dictate to us what we should and shouldn't be doing. But I think you can take those concepts, and in the world of sales, and let's say we're talking about real estate, for example, there are a specific list of things that we talk about. Now, the main thing about the flywheel is an economic engine. So what specifically, he sort of brings in this hedgehog concept. I don't want to get into too many concepts because it's just going to confuse the issue. But basically, it's asking yourself, what are you deeply passionate about? What you can be the best in the world at? And what drives that economic or resource engine for you? So in other words, as a salesperson, you and I have talked about this. What are our biggest skills and what are we passionate about? Obviously, if I hate making cold calls, I'm not going to do that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it'd be hard. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It'd be hard to get. It would be hard to develop momentum if you're not if you hate doing cold calls. You're just not going to have that momentum. So you have to recognize what is it that you're deeply passionate about. I think I'll go back to the Edmonton Oilers for a moment and Connor McDavid. Yeah, well, it's just a good example. I just, when you're talking about it, I was thinking, yeah, okay, that's exactly what McDavid did. He can take over a game, right? He gets his feet moving, he gets momentum, and he takes over a game, and he can lead his team to win. Now, I would like to say that in the last game where they beat Dallas, they didn't deserve to win that game. They only had 10 shots. So anyway, I digress. I won't bring up Connor McDavid again, but he's a guy that when he has momentum, he's hard to stop. And that's I think why you want to recognize how important momentum is because when you have momentum, it's a hard thing to stop.
Yeah,
it just keeps going. So.
And it's important because you're focusing on it. The most important thing is getting to some sort of consistency. Now, the steps to capturing your flywheel. So if you're looking at this as a salesperson, for example, and you're going, what is it? What are the things that are allowing me to make my sales? So what are these processes? And the first thing is you're creating a list of significant, replicable successes. So this includes new things you're trying. This includes things that you've tried and trued and tested that work for you. So, you've mentioned Buffini before. What is his 3 things or 4 things? What does he say? Pop buys, calls,
notes, and pop buys.
There you go. There's 3 main
calls,
things.
Notes, and pop buys.
That's part of building this flywheel. The other thing is, the second one is compiling a list of failures and disappointments. This is really important. Nobody
wants to talk
about that.
We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about our failures, though, do we?
Well, I think you do. I think you need to know what's not working. And if you just ignore it because, I had a failure, I don't want to admit I made a mistake, well, then you're making a mistake because basically you need to understand and compare what's working and what isn't and why. And you need to understand that. And the third thing is basically that you're understanding what components are going into this because you know what is successful and what isn't working. And then you're going to identify these things, like say calls, pop buys, notes, whatever it is that you do. And you're going to start placing them on this wheel. And you're going to say, here's the first thing I need to do. Here's the second thing I need to do. Here's the third thing, fourth, fifth. 6th, so that it falls in a logical comparison. When I was in the marine industry and I was doing the trade shows, I didn't stumble across it. I worked my ass off and I figured it out. What it took for me to get so many people to the boat show, make appointments, see them there, and sell them on what they wanted. So what was that process I put in place to do that? And I had a specific thing I did it started in October, and it was a lot of little things, but it basically was 5 or 6 main components that I had to do right up until the day before I went to that boat show. And I worked my ass off for 3-4 months because that was 30% of my year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, when we think about that, to have these activities that we do on a daily basis, and how important that is to our success. Because, when you marry the flywheel idea with the 20-mile march, idea concept as well, you get that. Okay, if you're trying to implement in your flywheel stuff, that too much stuff, like too many things, or if you're trying to implement things that you don't do well or can't learn to do well, I mean, we got to differentiate too, that just because you don't do something well doesn't mean you shouldn't be trying to improve at it either, right? I mean, if it's going to be effective in building your business, and you can learn how to do it, I think that's the key. Is you have to say, okay, is this something that I can learn how to do and be good at it? And if the answer is yes, then and are you going to do it? then you need to be doing it or implementing it. But the idea of marrying that flywheel with the 20-mile march, because the flywheel can burn you out if you get that thing spinning too fast. A while ago, I was doing a talk, and I was talking about momentum, and I was thinking, I was trying to be creative, and so I got this little top, and this
look at you with your
if
props.
If you look at that, and say, okay, that thing, if you try to get that thing to stand up, it's not going to stand up, right? It just falls over. But if you wrap a string around it and you pull that thing, and you get this gyroscope, spinning at a fast enough speed, it has momentum. It's gonna stay standing. It'll stand up there and spin. I could show you, but we're not really set up.
That might be a little too exciting. So we'll just
but maybe what I'll do is I'll insert a picture of a gyroscope, or one of these tops, just flying around. But anyway, the idea is that if you have it going too fast, it gets out of control, and you're not able to sustain that 20-mile march. So I think that's
really important. You mentioned that because it does tie in, and that's, you see, Edmonston, when we spoke about the 20-mile march, he created a flywheel prior to getting to Antarctica. So his flywheel was basically prepping, finding out what diet was best to eat while he was there, his physical condition, what equipment he should take. He had created all this and then remained consistent. That was a flywheel that was driving him to where he needed to go. And I think that's important to understand, that you shouldn't really have more than 5 or 6 components to this flywheel. Otherwise, it's getting too complicated. And what you're doing is basically figuring out, okay, what is it that I'm doing that is successful for me? I'm starting here, I'm going here, I'm going here, and you map out what it is that you do. So, for example, when I was in the marine industry, I basically reached out, I got a list together of all the clients that were thinking about buying a boat. Then I reached out to those clients. Then I offered them tickets to the boat show. Then when I knew which ones were coming, I set up appointments. And then I followed up with them during that whole 3 months. Oh, here's an idea for a boat. Here's what you were looking at. Maybe you should consider this. The offers that are going on at the show will more than significantly make sense to you and for when you should be purchasing your boat. Blah, blah, blah. I had all this figured out so that when I got to the show, I had my whole 10 days at the show were appointments. Boom, 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 set up for me. And all I did was it was brutal. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. That's a 10-day trade show and you're in a hotel and you're on your feet for a long time. But it more than panned out, because I'll tell you flat out, my invoice that I submitted to the company for commissions was 5 figures, easy. And it wasn't low 5 figures, it was mid 5 figures.
So that for 10 days work. Well, that's the other thing I think we underestimate is that we would maybe say, okay, well, for 10 days work, you had a 5-figure income, but really it wasn't for those 10 days. It was for the other several months prior to that was all. You might not have seen the results right away, but those results you knew were coming because you were working on your momentum.
And this is the flywheel concept. The hedgehog concept is understanding what you are very good at and, understanding these things and then putting them into play into this flywheel. And it's sort of draw a big friggin' wheel and put on the top. This is the first thing I'm going to do. Here's the second, here's the third. And it's a big arrow that goes like this. And it goes back to the top because you start over again. And then you go back to the top, and there's your wheel. There's your momentum. You don't want it to go too fast, and you certainly don't want it to stall out by going too slow. And the only way you can do that is be consistent in what you do. And that's really how simple it is. So for salespeople out there listening to this, start off by asking yourself, what are you deeply passionate about? In other words, that's more of a question if you're starting a business, but for yourself, you can say, what am I really good at? Am I good at making calls? Am I good at popping by and seeing people? What is it that I do best? And then what you can be the best at. So, hey, if I'm really good in front of people, then I'm going to put myself in situations where I'm meeting a lot of people. And I'm going to ask for referrals. And, that's what is important. And if I'm good on the phones and I'm good at doing cold calls and just, starting at 9, like that guy you always use the example of, and he makes calls from 9 a.m. to 11 and then he stops. If you're good at it, do it, but be consistent. And that's really the main point of all this.
Yeah, I think I was thinking of understanding as well how we keep score, is a way of building momentum. In real estate, we're in the business of listing and selling houses. So oftentimes we think, we keep score by how many houses did we sell or how many properties did we sell. But typically, you're not going to sell a house every day.
But that's the result, though, right? That's your result.
That's the result.
Yeah.
But the objective is then to get your mind off of thinking, okay, that's what I'm trying to accomplish. Don't think that I'm going to have to. I mean, it's good to be positive and to believe that you're going to sell a house today, but that's not going to be realistic unless you've been doing these other things that have set you up to sell the house today, right? And I think what you need, what I'm getting at is that I need to focus on those calls, notes, and pop-bys, or what are the 3 things that I have to do on a consistent basis and build my momentum so that I am selling a house. Maybe not one a day, maybe not one a week, but maybe 2 a month, maybe 1 a month, because then I'm consistently doing that. I'm getting the results based on my consistent activity. My flywheel is working, for me. So what are the 3 things? What are the 5 things? But I don't think you need to do more than 5 things. I mean, 3 or 5. I was also, when you were talking, I was thinking about um, my own career in real estate, and how do I, we can spend time on, we think, okay, if I get the right marketing package, if I get the right web page, if I do this, if I do that, there's always these shiny object syndrome, they call it, where all of a sudden, there's this thing that I'm talking to Greg DeMarco. He's a realtor in Ontario, and he says, this is really working for me. I have this special program that I offer my clients. And I'm thinking, wow, that sounds pretty cool. Maybe I should try that. But we oftentimes we'll jump from one thing to another, without really evaluating whether or not it's working for us. We need to look and say, okay, what works for Don Gertz? What works for Greg DeMarco? What works for Don Gertz isn't necessarily going to work for Greg DeMarco, and what works for Greg DeMarco isn't necessarily going to work for Don Gertz. So it's good to have ideas, but it's good to identify which ones work for you. Like for me, I'm a learner, and I can get bogged down in learning, but I have to say, okay, how do I take what I'm learning and apply that to teaching or helping somebody understand something better? So through education, that's got to be one of the things in my flywheel is education for my clients. So that when they understand the process of buying or selling a house, they understand, oh, Don understands the process of buying or selling a house. So therefore, that's his strength. So he's going to be the guy that can help me.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to say, because it all comes down to, look, in the end, when it comes to sales, people are people. We deal with people. All this interaction is important in order for us to make contact and rapport with people, and be consistent. Get that momentum going. And I think that's the toughest thing for a lot of people, is keeping the momentum up. That's why you get these little ebbs and flows in their sales performance. One month they're up, and then the next month they're down, and they can't figure it out. Well, it's consistency. It's because what happens is we get rolling in a month where wow, now it's a new month, I can sit back and relax. And the reality is you can't do that, because now you've just put yourself behind the eight ball for the next month, basically. And this used to happen to me where I'd get going and all of a sudden, okay, let's say you take a week off. Well, when you're in commission sales, that's pretty devastating, because now you got that week's done. And not that I'm advocating people not to take time off. I'm just saying, but that's what happens. And all of a sudden you say, oh, I sold a couple of houses last month, I should be okay. And then all of a sudden that month turns into 3 months where you haven't sold anything.
Well, for sure, you want to make sure that we're not saying that you can't take time off, because that just ends up, you just end up burning yourself out. But you got to be strategic about it. You got to be strategic about it as well. So I think what you want to say as well is to, if you're not having good results today, take a look 3 months ago and say, what were you doing 3 months ago? And if you want to have good success 3 months from now, get your flywheel working properly, and you're going to have good success in 3 months.
You just have to be consistent in what it is you're doing. So, well, that's it.
Well, there's probably more that we could talk about, but anyway, I appreciate your insight into the flywheel concept there, Greg, and we look forward to hearing more of your insights in our upcoming sessions. So,
again, this is yours too. So let's do this.
Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about different things, Greg's and my contact information is in the comments below, or in the remarks below, or in the description below. I don't know where we put it. But the other thing is that if you have a question, drop us a line, and we're happy to help you wherever we can. So in the meantime, take care, have a great week, and enjoy the soon-to-be summer weather.
Thanks, Don. We'll see you.